Hello, STR community, and especially Sérgio Lazzarini. My name's Tim Folta, and I am STR Division Chair. I'm so pleased to help launch our Meet the Scholar series today. Our intent with this series is to feature a sampling of scholars having made a large impact on the field, and make this content available to our members either synchronously or asynchronously through our divisional YouTube channel. In so doing, we hope you're enlightened by the many contributions of these individuals. We hope you're also inspired by the personal journey of influence each has had. Our Stronger Together task force has assembled a variety of scholars from which you can choose to watch and listen. And we would be very pleased to have you along for one or all the speakers scheduled between now and July. Please be aware that the STR division has a whole portfolio of virtual offerings throughout the year for your benefit. For example, to aid your intellectual development and networking, we will offer teaching PDWs, research symposia, regional paper workshops in Chile, Turkey, and Australia, and PhD networking events. For STR members hoping to engage others in the community, we've scheduled exercise groups, game nights, cultural cafes, and other things. Please see our divisional calendar and website and sign up for our social media channels to stay informed. So these efforts, we believe, are certainly important during these challenging times to keep you connected to a vibrant community that cares about your professional development. However, they also reflect our strong belief that the annual conference is only one way to nourish our members. So with this backdrop on the happenings in the division, it's wonderful that Sérgio Lazzarini is the first scholar we meet. He represents a generation of strategy scholars that's aggressively pushing us forward. And I look forward to hearing from him and about him.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everybody. My name is Roberto Basolo, and I will be in charge. I have the honor to be in charge of interviewing Sérgio. I will make first a brief presentation on Sérgio. After that, we will start the conversation. And about 40 minutes after we start, we will open to a Q&A. So let me go briefly through this amazing CV. Sérgio is the Chafi Haddadi Professor of Management at Insper in Sao Paulo. He got his PhD at Washington University in St. Louis in the year 2002. He had several visiting positions in very prestigious universities like Harvard, St. Gallen, in HEC, and so forth. What is more important maybe for today's conversation, his research tackled the intersection about the public and private sector and how they organize to improve economic and social performance. We will be discussing about this in some minutes. He's a founder and director of a center of Insper Metrics. It's a research center. He got a lot of prizes and awards. I will not go through them, I just show. But I think that another aspect that makes Sérgio unique is he's not only a bright researcher with a strong vita of publications in the leading scholar journal, but he was also a consultant of the International Development Bank, the World Bank. He was also his research and his article were also published in The Economist, Financial Times, Bloomberg, several very prestigious managerial outlets. And he has served in different committees at the Academy of Management. So, Sérgio, thank you very much for this time. Thank you very much for being here. And let me start breaking the ice. So, where did you grow up? Where you come from?
I'm here in São Paulo. I grew up here. I'm a person from São Paulo, even though I live in a different neighborhood. But I grew up in a mid-income neighborhood called Belenzinho. Very nice to mention this. I'm very proud of it. And so I'm here. I'm a creature of this city.
And your undergrad, in what was your undergrad? What major?
My undergrad was in agronomy. I'm an agronomist actually. When I was studying, because by my father had a farm, so I helped him in the management process. And during my undergrad studies, I specialized in agricultural economics. My natural trend would be to follow, economics in a sense, but then I was incentivized by some of my professors to actually pursue what was called and has been called agribusiness. Agribusiness is an area that essentially it's in a sense it's a strategy applied to agricultural chains and so on. And so I went to I specialized in this area of business. So I studied a lot, supply chains, etc. And this led me to pursue this career in business, this academic career in business studies in a sense and strategy.
So, and before jumping into your PhD, between your undergrad and the PhD, what was your main activity, your main experience?
Yeah, I was a consultant in this agribusiness sector. Working with food processors, trading companies, a bunch of firms. Back then, I didn't know that this strategy kind of discipline existed, but I was lucky to be part of a master's program here at the University of São Paulo with several scholars like Décio Zilberstein, Elizabeth Farina, Paulo Furquim, all those guys who were studying back then transaction cost economics, new institutional economics. So I was introduced to this kind of research stream back then. It was 95, 96. This was at the beginning here, at least in Brazil, even though in other schools in the United States, it was already kind of an important theory to explain the boundaries of the firm, corporate decisions, etc., etc. But I didn't know that strategy existed. And then I had an opportunity to participate in the first meeting of the International Society of New Institutional Economics. It was at Washington University, right? At the only business school. So I like it there because we they not only had scholars at the business school dealing with those topics like Todd Zenger, Jackson Nickerson, Gary Miller, a political scientist, was then at the school. Russ Koff was there also. A wonderful set of scholars. And also in the econ department, Douglas North, right? Many other guys dealing with those topics. So I thought that was very interesting. So I applied and thanks God I was accepted. It was a very interesting moment in my life.
And I imagine, Sergio, because when I listened your history, your personal history, you have a very broad exposure to very different topics. I know that your supervisor was Todd Zenger, no? Correctly?
Yes.
So
yes.
For a person like you that show so many interest, how was that part of your career of selecting, of narrowing and converging to a specific topic? How did you how that initial interest evolve?
Yeah, no, it's nice that you asked that, because back then WashU was pretty much interdisciplinary. So I took courses in the law school, I took courses in the econ department, poli-sci, I mean, you name it, psychology. My program, in a sense, was strategy and organizational behavior, meaning that some of my colleagues were in OB. So that was really important, and I tried to keep this more interdisciplinary mindset, to explore, let's say, opportunities, right, to integrate certain streams of knowledge, etc. At the business school, so I work with Todd, Jackson, Nickerson, etc. They were also very open to new perspectives. But in my dissertation, I converged initially to the study of relationships, buyer-supplier relationships and networks. All those things I was already studying in my master's, as I mentioned to you. I mean, I began with this kind of professional career as a consultant to agribusiness companies, essentially supply chains, right, and so forth. So, so my dissertation was about interorganizational relations, but this period at WashU was very important because I was exposed to a bunch of things. For instance, I took 2 courses of Douglas North, actually. It was a real honor and pleasure. And so I studied a lot, I mean, institutional development. This was key to support my subsequent refocusing of my research, right? Which was in this kind of more public, this public interface, discussing the effect of institutions on firm performance, or how institutions themselves are designed, or the impact of managers in the design of those public policies, right? I mean, all those things.
Sorry, let me interrupt a bit. And sorry, but because you have taken a broad approach. Was any moment, any personal moment in which you think that you were going too broad, losing focus, you were scared of that approach? Because when I see your research, everything looks great and it's amazing. But that path, did you have certain struggling moments on that decision of going broad?
No. It seems that, I mean, if you take a look at my papers and books, you may say, well, this guy's talking about everything. But it's all, in my opinion, it all boils down to comparative institutional analysis. I mean, this is my mindset. It's cost, right? It's about transaction costs, comparing organizational forms, different types of performance. Right. I mean, this is all that I learned in my master's and the doctoral. The course was actually at WashU in several moments. I actually took Coles one day to his hotel. I could listen to stories about his personal life. I mean, all this boils down to comparative institutional analysis, right? So, for instance, when my dissertation was about buyer-supplier relationships, which also is related to this general topic about the boundaries of the firm. This is based on transactional cost considerations, comparative analysis. If we're going to advise governments, completely different topic, on how they should manage certain types of activities, or right, or influence the economy, it is also comparative. I mean, you have several types of alternatives in which governments can act in the economy, since, I don't know, using, for instance, state-owned enterprises, or industrial policies, public-private partnerships, right? And even private markets can have a bunch of public incentives, no market forces. So, I mean, it is all comparative, and even now I use essentially, I mean, if you actually go back to the origins and the root is comparative institutional analysis. I was trained to do that, right?
Sergio, and in that area, where do you see the most interesting research opportunities today? And in the answer, I will also would like you to leverage on your situation of being in an emerging economy. So
yeah, right. Yeah, so that's nice. That's nice, Roberto, because you also know that Roberto and I, we're friends, right? I mean, so we talk every time, co-authors. So being in an emerging market, I mean, can be a difficult thing, right? Because, I mean, instability, all this roller coaster of, you know, changing policies. But in a sense, it's a blessing because you have several types of problems flying at your face and things that are not currently examined by current research. So when I graduated in 2002, nobody, for instance, was talking much about emerging markets and I mean, in strategy, let's say. And then all of a sudden there was this growing interest in examining emerging markets. Then we had China growing, and so folks started to ask questions about what are the implications of being in an emerging market. It's all institutional. You, Roberto, you have this wonderful line of research on crisis. I mean, which is pretty important, right? In general, and I myself, over time, I started, I mean, realizing how important and understudied governments were and are, I would say. And this was actually quite random in a sense. I mean, I was here in Brazil and hearing stories, and I was like, I mean, I'm doing this stuff on, you know, I don't know, supply chains, the boundaries of the firm. But I mean, when I talk to managers, they're mentioning other stuff. They're talking about political uncertainty. They're talking about government interference. They're talking about the presence of state-owned corporations in industries. And then I said, I mean, I'm not studying this. I mean, there's this disconnect between what is going on and what I'm studying. And then there was something happened, which was pretty random. I was invited by Bruce Kogut. Bruce was back then at INSEAD, actually. This was 2003, to participate in a global group of scholars examining who are the owners of the main companies, right? In several countries. And he asked me to examine Brazil. I started collecting data on Brazilian companies and their owners. That was 2004, something like that, 2005. And we here in Brazil and several other countries had this big privatization program in the 90s, right? And but when I started to analyze the data, I said, I mean, there are so many governmental actors still participating in companies. I mean, this is hugely important. I mean, why is that? And then I started digging deeper into this process, right? And trying to understand what is going on. And this led to an important kind of a research agenda that I'm involved with even today, which is, I mean, the presence of the government and the economy, this interface between private actors and the public sector, right? And so on. So it's not always easy, because sometimes when I mention, oh, you're studying state-owned enterprise, oh, those firms are inefficient, this is bad. I mean, we all know that private firms are better. Not necessarily like that. I mean, the answer is much more complicated. And I mean, and if you take a look at the world, I mean, sorry, I mean, those organizations are widespread, and there are public-private partnerships, there are public policies, private companies respond to public policies, and so on. So that's about it.
One issue, Sergio, I think that it would be nice to share with the audience. I think that there was a moment in your career where you decide to write a book.
Yeah.
And things is not a small detail, because a book will compete. You are in a more hostile environment than US for research. So writing a book will certainly compete with your papers, and you have been very competitive from the research perspective. And you wrote that amazing book that I think in Portuguese is Capitalismo do Laços, pronouncing correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does idea, what triggered you the decision of getting into that project? And what was the, how do you analyze the retrospective that project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, that directly resulted from that project with Bruce Kogut, which was called the the small world of corporate networks. And Bruce edited a book. I'm a co-author, but then I thought the audience here in Brazil would, I mean, it would be nice to explain what happened to the more public audience. I had this kind of good feeling that I needed to talk to the local audience. So this book that you mentioned, Capitalismo de Laços, which can be roughly translated as capitalism of ties or network-based capitalism, something like that, basically demonstrated how public and private interests were intertwined in the lives of corporations here in Brazil. As for the local audience, this was so important. This is by far, even though it was published in Brazil and not translated, this is by far, I would say, the most read piece that I ever wrote. I mean, journalists, lawyers, bunch of, I mean, students, they frequently write to me, they ask me questions, I'm invited to discuss those topics. And it didn't target, for instance, the Academy of Management Journal. I was not actually concerned with that when I wrote that. However, when I was writing this book, I was spending some time at Harvard. And then I had some interactions with Aldo Musacchio, who was back then. And Aldo was interested also in this general issue of state participation in the economy. So we decided to begin another book project, right, which led to my second book, which is called Reinventing State Capitalism with Aldo. Essentially, we expanded the concept and we generated several chapters that some of them actually led to some publications, like one paper at the Academy of Management Journal. I mean, so it was so important to generate a bunch of other publications, different from this first book. This one was kind of, there was this intention to generate more academic publications. Yet that book was also important. It was part of the debate because there was this need to understand what was going on. China was emerging. There was this emergence of state-owned organizations. Brazil also, I mean, India, if you take a look at India, there are several types of public funds. If you go to Singapore, I mean, there are two big state-owned funds investing in several firms. I mean, there was this need to understand what is going on. This book was also well received. It was actually even reviewed in this Schumpeter column of The Economist. We're very happy about it. So, I mean, this led to, I mean, several interactions and consulting projects with OECD, other organizations, the World Bank, etc. And it was also very important for public policy, in a sense, right? The results of those that kind of research could interact with policymakers, and even lead to new legislation here in Brazil. I mean, that was really cool. I mean, talking to politicians, explaining the results of their research, and this leading to improvements in law, right, and in regulation. This is, I mean, I really think this is crucially important.
As you show, it's easy to listen in your words a deep sense of purpose regarding improving society. That's great. And you mentioned consulting, and this is a tricky word for academics. Several times I listen the advice, don't spend time in consulting, focus on your papers. That's what mainly matters. That's something that when you are a doctoral student and a young scholar, you listen a lot. You have done consulting with multilateral institutions. I understand also with the private sector. What was your experience in that regard, and which will be your advice to younger or young scholars?
No, young scholars, I would say keep your consulting at minimum, right? Build your pipeline for sure, right? I mean, try to build your pipeline, and I don't. I mean, my consulting is not like do a strategic planning for me. I mean, other consulting firms will do it much better. So I try to find things, or I mean, I don't try to find, but when there's an opportunity, I try to see if this is more or less complementary with research, or at least if this will, another thing that I think is important is that by interacting with the private sector, with the external sector or governments, I can have a better sense of what is going on and the demand. Sometimes I get involved in some projects where I don't know whether that will generate some sort of publication or something, but at least I kind of start a new area, right? I mean, you read my CV, and you mentioned that I coordinate a center called Insper matrices. And it's pretty funny because now I'm studying a lot this other area, which is related, by the way. I mean, at least in my mind, which is impact investing, impact-oriented businesses, right? To me, it's a boundary choice as well. It's like, okay, governments usually take care, or they try to take care of those things that are more socially oriented, public services, etc., say a prison or a school or a hospital. What if we have socially oriented business that try to deal with it in this, or act in those areas? It's a comparative choice, comparative institutional choice. So, and now we kind of realized that companies, organizations needed an improved guidance on how to observe or how to measure, how to assess those externalities that they're generated, either positive or negative, right? So in a sense, and then, but there, of course, there's also this whole area of impact evaluation, policy evaluation, but what is missing is this connection with organization. So so we decided to create a center focused on this. Okay, so for instance, we did a consulting job funded by the Inter-American Development Bank here on a very new type of contractual arrangement called a social impact bond. The social impact bond is a contract where the government signs with private investors and private operators, where they deliver certain types of activities. Say they manage a prison, they manage a school, a hospital, whatever, and then they receive payments based on metrics of performance, right? So, for instance, if you're running a prison, they can have a metric of performance, like not financial, but something else, a measure of the externalities generated by the process. In a prison, for instance, the extent to which the released prisoners commit crimes again once they are released. This is called resocialization rates, right? Or reincident, which is the inverse of reincidence, right? Recidivism, actually, is a technical term. So you can have metrics of recidivism, and then the government can pay private operators along those lines. So we got involved in projects like this to understand more about those mechanisms, and then generate papers addressing some issues that are not understood, right? So that's essentially my strategy with consulting. I only get involved in more difficult things that are more, in a sense, experimental, right? They are not simply, let's do a SWOT analysis to an organization, or something like that. Something more experimental.
Sergio, I would like to shift a bit the conversation. Before moving, how many scholars are working with you at Insper? More or less.
Oh, a lot. So yeah, a lot. With papers, I don't know, 5, 6.
No, but in general, what is the research environment in your institution? How large is?
How large?
Yes,
Well, that's another thing in my career that sometimes when, I don't know, if you are working in an established school, you take for granted all the institutional environment and all the structure. You know that, Roberto, because you also help build the IA, right? You are a leader. And that was my case. So essentially, when I arrived at my school, 2002, I was the only research-oriented management scholar. So essentially, I had to help build the school. And that was, in a sense, I had several balls. I mean, they asked me several times to help in administrative jobs. I was dean twice, academic dean twice. So, I mean, on the other hand, this I was part of the process. So I can say that I hired many of our my current colleagues. And for instance, right now in strategy, we have Sandro Cabral, we have Guilherme Fowler, others, we have focus in marketing, Dani Clara. I mean, we have now a group. We're not a big group, but at least we're trying to be a productive group, right? We're trying to be a productive group that is trying to connect to the international community, right? Because this is not always the case, as you know, Roberto, right? Sometimes here in Latin America and other countries, there is this tendency to say, I mean, connecting internationally is so difficult to publish in SMJ, so let's not do that, let's publish in local journals, etc. So it's so difficult. So essentially, we need to try to nurture this culture, right, of staying connected with the international community. Not easy, right, but at least we try.
Okay, you anticipate and partially answered the question I was going to tell you. Maybe some of the researchers that are now in the audience are thinking or are located in emerging economies or not in the central country's great research environment. So one of my question is if you can give us a reflection about the challenges and the academic community faces in emerging economies. In maybe Latin America is more something that you know more, but in general, and how to overcome that challenge. You already said I tackled part of the question, but if you can expand a bit, and also if you can sell working, if there is working in an emerging economy.
Yeah, and no, I can also sell our paper in the Journal of Management, right, with Herman Guinness and other guys on the challenges of publishing and staying in Latin America and other emerging economies. I mean, it's a big challenge. And the biggest challenge, perhaps, is that sometimes the organizations or the schools are not as developed, and they don't have well-defined research tracks, meaning that they're going to ask you to do a lot of things, teaching and administrative tasks and so on. I mean, over time, you need to build this. As I said, I helped build this in my institution, creating strong kind of research-oriented tracks where my colleagues have, I mean, if they publish more, they have less teaching load or something like that, right? I mean, so it's so difficult because, I mean, you also need to create your own, or change your own micro-institutional environment, your own rules of the game. It's not always natural, right? We don't have that many resources as well. I mean, so many competing demands, instability, all sorts of things along those lines. On the other hand, we have opportunities, right? I mean, as long as we have, I mean, we are in a good environment, and we have a school that is committed to research. So perhaps we can have this kind of general orientation where we address the many problems that we have here in emerging economies with good research, and this helps, right? Perhaps have new topics, original topics. They are not always they are not well studied yet, right? And this creates some new opportunities.
I have one last question before opening to other assistant question, and it's a personal one. I never asked you. What is your favorite soccer team, Sérgio?
It's São Paulo. São Paulo is a soccer team here in São Paulo city, right? So yeah.
Are you a guy that go to see match or not?
Yeah, I follow the local championship, but I'm not, I mean, a guy that goes to stadiums that is a strong fan. Like Sandro Cabral, my colleague, he's a true fan. He goes to the stadium. I mean, I try to stay with my family, etc., and so watch the games and try to follow what is happening. I mean, remotely.
Okay, thank you for that last confidence. I think that before going to the question, we have to take a photograph, no, Chao?
Yes, please. Everyone, if you are dressed from waist up, feel comfortable to open up your camera. We'd love to take a screenshot and capture this moment. Thank you. So 1, 2, 3. Say cheers. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, and we're also opening up for questions, right, Roberto?
Yes, there is one question you can also read, Sérgio, there, and is what is the research project about which you are most passionate right now?
Oh my God, there's so many. One thing that changed, and that was really cool at my schools, was that we created a doctoral program, and we had several students. Some of them are here. I can see it. I mean, I can see Leandro, Tomás, Leo Pongelupi was not our doctoral student, but he worked with me a lot. Vitor Freire, very happy that you guys are here. So essentially, I mean, all those guys are doing marvelous research, and I'm kind of working with them. So this is brilliant. They all come with new ideas and so on. And so I have a bunch of papers. We're generally investing, all those guys. So generally, we're investing in this general area of whether organizations, corporations can what are the mechanisms that may lead those corporations to embrace social environmental projects, whether this may or not be consistent with economic performance, right? I mean, several projects along those lines. So I'm very happy. So in terms of papers, I can say that, I mean, now essentially what I'm doing is working with those guys, right? Now I'm starting a new book project. Essentially, I love to, I know you asked me about books. I think I didn't answer that question properly, but I love to write books. Why that? Because with books, you can build your argument, right? And you are, sometimes you send a paper to a bunch of reviewers, they want to, okay, it's fair to say that, I mean, this is wrong, that this is not well explained, but sometimes they want to change your argument along the lines that they want, etc. I mean, a book or more, I mean, you can say, you can develop the argument, and furthermore, you can have chapters where you expand the argument. And right now, I mean, closing this triad of it'll be a triad of books dealing with this public-private interface. Now I'm writing a book on privatization, essentially. So, okay, I mean, we know that states are present in economy, and so they control several firms, etc. How about then we get rid of them and privatize this those organizations? Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? How can it be done? What are the risks? So I'm working on this right now. I would say that this is, I mean, I'm very excited about that. I mean, I'll wake up thinking about the underlying argument. So to me, it's important. I need to be. I'm starting to realize that realizing that I need to write books, because it's a more kind of developed argument. It's a more, I would say, long-term project, right?
Yes, it's like fresh air, and in some regard. There is here a difficult question, and I'm going to add a second part to the question. The question said, who is your academic idol? And I'm going to add why.
It's Ronald Coase, without doubt. I mean, it's basically, I mean, everything I write, it goes back to Coase. I mean, it's absurd how this guy generated all main insights that inform either, I don't know, the corporate decisions or governmental decision. I mean, Coase also has, talking about privatization, for instance, Coase has a very nice paper, not very well known. I mean, but it's an excellent paper called the Lighthouse in Economics, where lighthouses they were used as examples of public goods, right? Because I mean, you are on your boat, you're seeing the lighthouse and you are going through the sea, etc. And so it's a public good. You cannot exclude anyone, etc. So Coase analyzed what happened with the organizational lighthouses in England, and he realized that for some time lighthouses were managed by private actors, right? So then he said, I mean, you don't need, if you have a public good, it doesn't need to be managed by the state, right? That insight, right, is the baseline insight that, for instance, I'm using in this new book on privatization. Of course, there were many developments. Coase used it to generate those general insights, and then other scholars would develop that afterwards, like the insight that companies will internalize certain types of activities if transaction costs are high. That insight was later developed by Oliver Williamson, for instance, and many others. So it's a Ronald Coase, for sure.
Well, the next question is very tied to your answer, because as a scholar who is passionate about TCE and who love Coase, I would add, how do you dispassion your analysis so as not to be biased when you do research in favor of your theory?
Yeah, I'm seeing here, they're talking about TCE, right? Transaction cost economics. Yeah, I mean, when I was here, before I went to WashU, that was my paradigm, transaction cost economics, basically. That was, I mean, we were basically doing a lot of analysis. So for instance, an agribusiness firm will vertically integrate or not, depending on the asset, depending on the level of asset specificity, right? I mean, so I can say I'm an original TC guy. When I went to WashU, as I said, I mean, it was a more interdisciplinary approach. And then I started noticing that that very idea was contested. I mean, it was not, I thought that was kind of a Bible or something, but it was not the case. I had colleagues in organizational behavior that would say, you know, this assumption of opportunism is too strict. People trust each other, etc. So I started reading about trust, about social networks, right? Mark Granovetter. If you take a look at my dissertation, I try to kind of complement those things. I try to be, I try to confront theories. One paper in my dissertation was like, okay, I mean, if it was an experimental paper, if you offer a contract to someone, will the signal mistrust, right? There were competing propositions. So I just tested that. When I saw, I didn't find support for this proposition that was pretty popular back then, and offering a contract would undermine trust. Right, I mean, so I always try to see that. I was not kind of a fan of TCE or anything. I just said, I mean, this is useful. Let's use this general argument. Let's confront this argument with data, and let's see what happens. Right. Having said that, as I said, my original thinking is Coase, and I remember that when I was in the doctoral program, Coase, as I said, Coase was around all the time there at WashU, and there were many discussions on whether asset specificity or transaction cost explanations were sufficient to explain boundary choices. Coase back then was writing an article kind of criticizing that old paper by Klein on the Fisher body, right, transaction problem, which was the origin of the hold-up story, the whole hold-up story. Coast was simply saying that that was not true because Coast was there. He visited General Motors, right? And he knew, actually, he was a person who was there at the moment studying that. So I was, in a sense, I said, okay, right? So then what are the alternative explanations? I mean, if it is not asset specificity, then it is what? So, I mean, and then you start looking for new explanations, improved theories.
Okay, with the next question, we are going back to your researcher experience, and here we have, what would be the top three suggestions about research writing you would give to a junior researcher in Strat?
Research writing, how to write papers? How to write papers?
Yes, research writing,
yeah.
Exactly. Research
writing. Right. Yeah, I mean,
writing papers overall. I think that the question is writing papers. In producing paper could be, you can be broader if you want, no?
Yeah. Well, when I remember Anita McGann, in terms of first thing that I always do is to see if the topic is interesting and will attract an attention, either from from a kind of a broader audience, depending on your positioning or academia, right? And I remember Anita McGann mentioning that we shouldn't go. You mentioned sports, right? Soccer shouldn't go and run towards where the ball is now, but where the ball is going, right? I mean, you need to have this sense of opportunity of what are the future movements, right, of research. So you, for instance, Roberto, you are investing in this crisis and this line of research on crisis. I mean, of course, this is important. And now we had this COVID crisis. I mean, it will be crucially important to know how companies adapt to crisis. So this is a kind of an example where the ball may be going. Right, so that's one. Try to see where the ball is going. How we can do that? It's not reading papers that are published now in journals, because those papers started 5 years ago or even more. Right? It's actually talking to people, connecting with people, going to conferences, etc., etc. Right? I don't know. I mean, it could be anything. I mean, I'm not the person to say. Every game is a game. I mean, there's a game in corporate strategy. There's another game in competitive strategy. There's a game in this literature on alliances networks. I'm trying to play in this game of the social-oriented company, stakeholders, etc., and strategy, policy, public policy, and strategy. I mean, every topic is a game. I mean, you need to know. I mean, second thing is actually to have a very crisp and clear writing. I mean, and I remember when I was in a PhD program, that was so important. There was a person helping the university, right? Helping students who were not native English speakers like me. So I actually used that woman a lot. I mean, I went there every time with a text. I mean, asking for suggestions, and also remember Todd Zenger mentioning to me that, I mean, English writing is pretty straightforward, right? We did that, or we analyzed that. I mean, for instance, in Portuguese, I think more Portuguese than Spanish, Roberto, but we try to build long sentences, convoluted sentences. Everybody thinks it's artistic. You know, this is a kind of change in mindset. Another thing is how to build or to write the introduction. And for that, I really recommend a paper by Jake Barney. It's a short article in Academic Management Research. I don't remember the title of the article, but it's how to frame an introduction, etc. And Jake has this very nice kind of allegory where you writing a paper, you're kind of going to a party. And you go to a party, there's this big room. You need to go and find a group of people talking, right? So it's, I don't know, it's a stakeholder theory, it's corporate, it's vertical integration, it's crisis. And you go there, you need to know the debate. You need to know the debate. And the first paragraph is actually expressing this debate or summarizing this debate. The second paragraph is a however, right? It's like in a conversation, you say, okay, guys, I understand what you guys are saying. However, what is missing is as follows, right? And what is missing is not that. Sometimes I see papers here published in Brazil, which is like that. There's a lot of papers on alliances in high tech. However, there's no paper using Brazilian data. That's not a contribution, right? That's not a contribution. The contribution is what do the Brazilian data tell you about certain things that are not well understood, right? So there's this important thing which is understanding and proposing and kind of filling this kind of gap in understanding, right? So this is the second paragraph, and then you write, then you go again talking about your contribution. So this is crucial. I mean, if you don't write a good introduction, you get a reviewer. The reviewer will probably reject your paper because the reviewer get angry, and whatever you do afterwards, I mean, it'll be basically, I mean, they're well considered.
The paper you mentioned, one in the audience already wrote, is from 2018.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks, Vitor.
Paper for publication, Academic Management Review.
Yeah, Vitor is my student as well. Thank you, Vitor. You know, I mean, I have my kind of slaves here.
Good to see you.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Before going, there is a question, but I am intrigued in your academic career. Do you remember facing a dead-end paper, a paper in which you have worked for long and you cannot solve it, and it seems that it's going nowhere? Do you have an experience, and how did you solve that puzzle?
Many times. I mean, I think this year I'll break my record. It is a paper that was finally accepted at the Industrial Corporate Change. 12 years of revision. I mean, it was rejected 6 or 7 times, twice in the second R&R, which is pretty, I mean, being rejected in the second R&R is really painful, really, really painful, because you invest a lot in the paper. I mean, it was eventually accepted by Giovanni Dozzi, and that's, oh my God, Giovanni Dozzi accepted. So I was really happy. So, I mean, sometimes I endure, sometimes we try to, because we believe in the paper, sometimes, I mean, we just shift your attention to other things. So for instance, I have a paper in my dissertation on the dynamics of interfirm networks, where with Todd Zenger, actually, where we try to build this argument that Todd had this theory about vacillation, right? How firms may go back and forth in terms of certain organizational decisions like decentralization, centralization, decentralization. So we actually try to create a theory or to build a theory more or less along these lines. So we got rejected many times. At a moment I said, I mean, I'm not interested in this anymore. So I kind of abandoned that paper. However, more recently, I saw a paper published actually by Ron Burt, who is a very important guy in the network theory, which has this kind of a similar argument, right? How networks may go back and forth in terms of different configurations. Anyway, I mean, in a sense, I got happy because I said, oh, what we were saying was not actually absurd in a sense, right? It made sense, but unfortunately, I mean, we didn't manage to get that published. So sometimes I just abandon a paper because then I said, I mean, I'm not interested in that. If I'm not interested in a piece, then I mean, I only publish things that I believe in. I mean, or that I'm interested in. I would like to invest in that, right? So.
Okay, Sérgio, there is again a question about doing research in emerging, or being a scholar in emerging economies, and what are your top recommendations to fund or otherwise support research for faculty working in resource-poor organizations?
In what? Sorry?
Poorer or organizations that lack resources for research.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That can be really, really problematic. I mean, if the organization doesn't have resources, then it's complicated because perhaps you're not going to have time to do research, right? I mean, it's not a good situation. You need time. It's not. I don't think that resources to buy databases or that kind of thing is as important as having time. And if we are, for instance, in an emerging market, I mean, when we have families, we need to have a good salary. So sometimes we need to teach a lot, etc. I mean, I always try to stay at organizations that had a minimal commitment to research. And as I said, even at Insper, right? I mean, sometimes I even had to help that process happen. Okay, I participated several times in strategic planning process, trying to see if we could have other sources of funds, if we could convince managers that research was important, if we could create specialized career tracks, right? I helped design a more focus research-oriented career track. Sometimes they also need to work. I mean, if it's not possible and you would like to do research, I would recommend that you try to find another institution in another country or something. I mean, now even in emerging markets, we have many schools, not many, but some schools right here and there investing more and more in research.
Could you elaborate even further regarding doctoral students in emerging markets? So you mentioned before that you launched the doctoral program, and if doing research is a bit challenging in emerging markets or in South America, because you start in US. No, our doctoral students should start in a more aggressive environment. So what are your recommendations for those young scholars that decide to do their PhD in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, whatever?
Yeah, well, in our doctoral program, and there are others here in São Paulo, very good programs, we try to follow more or less what is found in a good U.S. university. Of course, considering our scale, right? All other things constant. I mean, we try to have give them a very good background, a very good training, etc., etc. Proof of that, I mean, I think there are, so for instance, Tomás, who is here, was my student. Our student here is now a postdoc at Harvard Business School. I mean, and he'll be on the job market, right? I mean, if you like to hire Tomás, I mean, so, and what we have here is a very good training, and our doctoral program is joined with economics, meaning that those guys really have very good empirical training, right? I mean, and those guys are experts in all types of econometric techniques that you can imagine. So combine that with a smart kind of action to get novel databases, unique databases, leverage, data that is in companies, etc. Then we're going to have very good papers. So and there are very good programs that they're going to find in emerging markets along those lines.
We don't have additional question, but I would like to make a change in the dynamic of this conversation, if the division allow me. And we have several people that worked with you, several of your students, and I would really love to listen at least one of that students talking about Sérgio. I know that is a difficult position, but it would be great from a person that see you from outside. What do you admire? What are the aspects about Sérgio that? Sorry, Sérgio, if I put you in uncomfortable, but it would be.
Do I need to leave? Should this be double blinded or should I leave?
But it would be nice to see other eyes about Sérgio. So I invite, if any of you that are here would like to stress.
Oh, there's another one, Pedro Macul here, also working with me. And they are all here.
So Sérgio, I was about to blast you because you forgot about me in repeated occasions.
That's right, yeah.
And I've been here.
I have my cell phone here and the computer with everybody here, so I couldn't see you, but you are here. Let me see if I didn't forget anyone.
I'll pretend that I believe.
So Pedro was actually my undergrad student. He did a very nice kind of research while in the undergrad program, helped Aldo and I build very complicated databases. One of his actually papers in the undergrad program was accepted recently in strategy science. So and now Pedro is a doctoral student at UCLA. So good to see you, Pedro.
Thanks, Sérgio. Always good to see you too. I will also be in the job market like all the Brazilians that are your students next year. So Sérgio had the perfect timing.
This is the Brazilian invasion.
Exactly. It's the Brazilian wave of academia because we have like 5 people here in this call that are Sérgio students that will be in the job market next year. So congratulations on that timing. But answering Roberto, and Roberto, I actually met you one time that you went to Insper. We talked briefly back then when I was starting to work for Sérgio. So nice to see you again.
Okay.
But so, I mean, Sérgio basically like molded me as a researcher because I was like in the undergraduate program in economics. And like, I always wanted to like, you know, keep doing econ. And, you know, I started working with Sérgio and I started working, you know, he had like 2 kind of lines of research. One was state-owned enterprises. The other one was the impact investing. And I started on the state-owned enterprises side of his research. And, you know, and he introduced me to so many people. And, I ended up with Aldo Musacchio in HBS right after I started working with Sérgio. Later on, I did a master's degree with him in Brandeis University. And so, you know, and they kind of slapped me out of the idea of doing an econ PhD, which I am really, really thankful for now. And I think that one like really nice thing about what Sérgio does in Brazil is like, I think Sérgio has like a social impact of like forming, like educating really good, and you know, not trying to brag, but really good people, like researchers for, you know, for the academic environment of Brazil, which is a really good economics environment, but not so much in management. At least we don't have this tradition. But I think Sérgio is building like a really good cohort. And we have Tomás here, we have Leandro, Vitor, the other Leandro Nardi. And, you know, so we have a lot of them here. I think Sérgio is doing a great service to the Brazilian academia in management with this. So we're all thankful for that, Sérgio.
Thanks, Pedro. Well, always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Pedro. I think that was very useful, your comment. So I find it very useful. And I would like just to open for the last question to any of the audience, if they want to directly ask Sérgio a final question. And so I think we can wait a bit. Well, for me, it has been an honor and a pleasure in leading this conversation. Thank you very much, Sérgio, and thank you everyone that attended today. Xiao, I don't know, you have a final comment?
Well, thank you, Roberto, for the wonderful moderation. Thank you, Sérgio. That was absolutely amazing. We will have the next session for the Meet the Scholar on December 15th. So you folks will hear from me. Sorry for the mass emails, but we'll hear from me on the links. Looking forward to seeing you there. And before that, have a wonderful rest of the November.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really, it was a real pleasure and honor to be here. I mean, it's so. I mean, anyway, keep up you all the good work. Thanks for being here. Thanks to my students and friends here. And you know, let's keep in touch. Let's see if we can meet, if not in person, virtually, right? In in all of those meetings. Thanks, Jiao. Thanks, Roberto. Thanks, team, for the invitation. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Sérgio.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.